Welcome, everybody. Great to see you today on the first day of World Childless Week 2025. My name is Alex Williamson, and I am your host today with a beautiful panel of practitioners who work with people in the childless, not by choice, and involuntary childless community. So today is our pleasure to bring to you a really important conversation, which occurred to me probably about 6 months ago. I started to get a feeling that this would be an important conversation to have during this week. And thank you so much, Steph, for allowing us some space today to bring this conversation out into the world and to share it with yourselves. So I'm going to start this 60 minutes by introducing myself, and then I'm going to go around and introduce the panel that I'm with today. And we're going to get started on our conversation. I can see there's some great inputs into the chat box already. Thank you for letting us know which part of the world you're from. And as the conversation develops over the next 60 minutes, please feel free also to pop in some questions in there that you may like us to answer. This is being recorded for YouTube, and if you ask any questions into the chat box, that won't be seen live on YouTube later, but we can look at those questions and anonymously share them amongst the panel, and we can answer them for you, hopefully during this next hour. So as I said at the top of the call, my name is Alex Williamson. Around 6 or 7 years ago, I found myself in a really difficult position where I had to come to terms and accept that I was going to be childless, not by choice, in this lifetime. I met my partner over 13 years ago when I was towards my late 30s, just into my early 40s. He let me know he had 2 children already, so he had an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I found myself instantly catapulted into the world of stepmomhood. From there, we then, after about a year into being together, we decided to try for our own family and went through a series of explorations, including IVF. And during that IVF journey, I was diagnosed with womb cancer, which is also known as endometrial cancer or uterine cancer, and is the formation of cancer cells in the lining of the womb. This abruptly ended my journey towards motherhood at that point, as the treatment for this type of cancer, it is treated primarily with a hysterectomy. So that really became the conclusion at that point of the possibility of me and my partner bringing a child to this world together. We went through various other explorations of both surrogacy and adoption. Unfortunately, neither of those were successful for us to build our own family alongside my stepsons that I was raising during that time. And as I mentioned, around 6 or 7 years ago, I had to finally accept that this journey had come to an end for me. And I started my path towards healing and acceptance about my involuntary childless status. During that time, I started to notice some of the difficulties for stepmoms who were in a similar position to myself. And I started to run support groups just at the time from my living room for local women based in the Brighton area who found themselves childless, but also in the step parenting world. From there, I went on to expand that work and also trained to be a coach. And I currently coach step families and women in that situation. And it was really from that development of my work from support group up to coach that I really started to notice some of the terminology being used by everybody was very, very overused terms. And that's some of the subjects I want to bring to light today. So that's some of my story about how I've ended up in my current situation and how I've connected with World Childless Week and Gateway Women and Reignite Weekends over these years. I'm going to hand over next to introduce you to Bindi, who's going to tell you a little bit about her journey and what she brings to the panel here today. Bindi, over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. So I'm Bindi Shah, and my journey into childlessness and being in this amazing community, I have to say, very, very unexpected to be in a place where there is a community, there is a childless community where we can all come together as well. So thank you so much for World Childless Week. So my journey really started with those relationships which don't go anywhere. So the non-committal, I always call them. And especially during those fertile years. So, I had one relationship which was 5 years, didn't go anywhere. And it's that typical thing of where you think something's going to go somewhere. So you stay, you long, you hope, and it doesn't go to anything, and you're at the same time your fertility is dropping all the time and you're getting older. So I actually met my husband towards, we were coming towards mid-30s, fertility already dropping, but not really realizing as well. That was the other thing with mine, that kind of not knowing enough about fertility and infertility, and just kind of not knowing enough. Soon after we met, we got married, and I was then diagnosed with adenomyosis, which, for those who know, is the growth within the uterine wall lining. Nothing really that they can do. The thing was cope with it. So it's very heavy periods, a lot of pain, completely awful. And at the time, and it's so interesting now when I look back, at the time, the consultants, so they knew we were trying for a child, and no one really brought up any question marks. Like, it was like, oh, yes, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So again, there was that kind of thing about not knowing enough, but the expert saying, well, it's going to be fine. So I didn't really worry. I didn't worry. And then by the time it didn't happen, then, of course, going close to my 40s, it was too late. Like, there was all of, it was getting to that stage where it was too late. And in between everything with the adenomyosis, I was on some progesterone, synthetic progesterone, which was really awful for my mental health. So I knew I wouldn't be pursuing IVF, wouldn't be going down that route. My husband and I tried adoption. So we went through the process and were not accepted to go further. And it was really at that point where that was my realization. So that was my point where I knew, okay, I'm going to be childless now. So that was the realization. The grief hits, your whole, my whole world really fell apart at that point. And I too then found Gateway Women, found World Childless Week, found this amazing community. And what what I do and why I'm here on this panel is I guide meditation classes, and I also do writing workshops. So that's what I'm bringing into this chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Bindi. And I think you also support some of the social meetups locally as well, don't you, for the childless community?
I do, yes. So Brighton social meetups, we meet once a month in Brighton, yes, which is lovely because it's in person and really lovely.
Great. Thank you, Bindi. And Mariel, I'll hand over to you to explain your journey and your contribution to the panel today, your perspective.
Thanks, Alex. I'm really delighted to be here to talk about both my experience of being childless and also the way that I try and offer support back into the childless community. My pronouns are she, they. I've tried to change them on my name label and I can't, but just to say that I'm, as well as being part of the childless community, also part of both the queer and neurodivergent communities. And all three are really important parts of my identity, actually, and important parts of my journey. So yes, my name's Mariel. I'm a childless counsellor or therapist, and there's some debate about the language, which is interesting. I also have other jobs. I'm a celebrant and I'm also a tutor, both for counsellors and for children with special educational needs. So I trained as a person-centred counsellor, which is a form of counselling characterised by unconditional positive regard, which I think is really important for people like us when we've experienced shame and failure, to have that, to learn to have that unconditional positive regard. I feel is really important, and I think that's one of the things I definitely bring. I bring that to my clients. I also try and bring it to myself. Empathy and understanding and congruence and realness. And I think realness is such an important part of the counselling journey. I am myself in my room, in the counselling room. My clients come to me because they know I'm childless, mostly, although I do have clients who come and see me for other reasons. But yeah, they come to me because I'm childless, because I've had that journey. And it's an interesting time of year for me at the moment, because September 10 years ago was when my journey to being a parent ended. And anniversaries are funny things, it makes me look back and it also makes me look forward. But basically, I really wanted to be a parent from a very young age, like many of us. And I just thought, again, like many of us, that it would just happen and I didn't really need to think about it too much. But I did find it hard to meet somebody. I was also in the closet as a queer person, and that didn't help. And I had a lot of shame around that a lot of which, and I'm going to talk more about this tomorrow in another webinar, but a lot of that came from homophobia from society becoming internalized, and that definitely made my journey harder, actually. So yeah, I tried to have children. I was in lots of straight passing relationships, trying to have a child. I tried to have children the natural way. That didn't work. My partner at the time and I looked into IVF, but I was really strongly discouraged from trying IVF because of various gynae-related health problems. So I never even tried it. And then my relationship broke down and I started looking into adoption as a single person, and I was turned down for adoption. I appealed and I kept appealing up to the highest level because I had the bit between my teeth at this point, and I was like, I think this is unfair that I've been turned down. So I kept appealing and I kept appealing. And the final panel that I stood in front of, which again was this time 10 years ago, recommended that I ought to be able to continue the process of adoption, but they could only recommend, they couldn't compel any local authority or charitable organisation to take me on as a potential adopter, and none of the local adoption agencies would take me on, basically, even though I had this recommendation. So yeah, my journey was over, and I didn't know at that point that there was going to be a life after childlessness. I thought that my life as I knew it was completely over. And 10 years on, I can say, yes, there is a life after childlessness. Of course there is. And I've actually found that one of the things that supported me has been to work in the childless community and offer support to the childless community. And I know we're going to come more onto this in a minute. But yeah, that's kind of my journey, and that's why I'm here.
Welcome. You're very welcomed in this space, Muriel. All of us are. It's lovely to hear our stories. I'm going to pass on to Shaneen now to share your story and your role in the panel today. Thank you.
Thank you to World Childless Week, to creating this opportunity, and to all of us sharing our stories here today. It's the shared humanity is really, really valuable to me. So my story is also about 10 years ago, in my mid-late 30s, had my background being social infertility, similar to what Bindi was saying, just not meeting the right sort of person at the right sort of time. Come my mid to late 30s, suddenly it dawning on me that I was having early menopause symptoms. By 40, I was in menopause. So that the next few years were just spent dealing with that experience of menopause unexpectedly. And at some point it dawned on me, of course, this means I'm also childless and grandchildless and all of the other lesses and losses. Yes, it was quite the journey to find the support that I needed for myself. And along my journey to find the support needed for myself, and in the research I was doing, I found out that there are very, very high levels of childlessness at this point in time. So it really is a strong drive for me to get our voices out there. There are many of us, and our stories are as valuable to be witnessed and heard. And whatever that means, life means for us. There's a different kind of a role and different kind of archetype for us. And that's really what I want to bring forth in my work, supporting myself and others. I, somewhere along the way, became a step parent as well, and met Alex in the step mum support group. That's how I've come to be here. Alex invited me. My role today in the panel is to share my understanding of what trauma-informed childlessness support means.
That's great. Thank you, Shaneen. And absolutely a moment just to honour and reflect all of our journeys, anniversaries, milestones, seasons that we experience, and know that we hold each other and our wider community holds us as well as we go through this conversation. Thank you for all the sharings into the chat as well. And so I talked a bit about my motivation behind some of what I felt was not so much misinformation, but overuse of certain terminology in the wider world, perhaps in the explosion of social media and TikTok, these words, trauma-informed, counsellor, therapist, coach, support group, all seem to become somewhat interchangeable. And I felt there was perhaps a lack of knowledge for people starting out on their journey to have information about what they should be looking out for, what the different modalities had to offer, and some of our different experiences around that. And I think as we go through the next conversation, we'll hear as well how many of us have taken parts from different modalities and dipped into different supports at different times through our own journey, 10 years, 6 years, all the different journeys that we've heard described by the panelists today. So I'd like to start this conversation with yourself, Mariel, our childless counsellor joining the call today and the panel. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about, which I found was out there, but I'd love to hear your perspective around, is some of that terminology around psychotherapist, therapist, counsellor. What can we do to help people understand this world a bit better about how they might go out and have their understanding about where they can get that clinical support and help?
Absolutely. I think these are really interesting questions. There's a lot of language out there. There are a lot of different roles. Some people are qualified, some people are unqualified. And I think that would be my first point, really, is if you're going to see somebody for emotional support, to inquire or look on their website and find out what qualifications they have. And it's my opinion and also my experience that counsellors, psychotherapists, therapists can have trained in many, many different modalities. I mentioned person-centered. I would now call myself an integrative therapist, which means I keep my person-centered core, but I draw on other therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, like art therapy, like narrative therapy. So there's also psychodynamic counselling. There's Gestalt counselling. There's so many different kinds, but all counsellors should have had some form of training. And I guess that's the first thing I would ask you to check out if you're looking for someone to go to for therapeutic support, is, are they trained? There's some really interesting research, which I've got a little bit of here, which I'm just going to share, about the therapeutic relationship and the outcomes of counselling or psychotherapy. And basically what that means is that while it's really important for therapists to be trained, the kind of training that they've done seems to be less important in determining good outcomes of therapy, basically. But what does seem to be really important is the relationship between the client and the counsellor. So if you go and see a counsellor and you've checked out that they're trained and you're satisfied that they are and they're registered with a professional body and that all feels safe, you go and see them and you have a session with them and either you think, yeah, I'm really connecting with this person, this feels really good, or no, they're not quite getting me, this relationship doesn't feel quite right, I'm not really sure about it. One of the things I would recommend is stick to your gut feeling. If it feels right, great, stick with that counsellor. If it's not feeling quite right, then that's okay. And I think sometimes we really stay in therapy thinking, oh, it's going to be okay. This person's got a really good qualification. This person is childless, and they've got lots of experience of working with the childless community, but it doesn't quite feel okay. And there is research that backs this up. So I guess that's the first thing I'd say is you can shop around a bit, find the right counsellor for you? Sorry, go on, Alex.
I think that's really great advice, Muriel. And I think I wanted to couple with it as well. So, for example, in my own development, professional development, I wouldn't say I'm qualified to the level of a therapist or a counsellor or some of the things you've described. Would, however, say that I am life trained, if you like, and I have, through that process, not just experienced childlessness, but also dived in to question more and to find out more. And I've almost, in the way, for example, now when I'm coaching, I almost could call it therapeutic coaching, though I haven't trained. That would be misinforming in some way, because I haven't trained in the way that you're describing. But I have gone into different self-development practices and drawn on them. And through my own personal mission to understand myself better, develop myself and my own skills better. But it's not, apart from the coaching qualification, that would be the only qualification, which again, we could call into question. Coaching qualifications as well are, if you like, could be somewhat made up or created. There are sometimes online courses. You don't even have to have met a tutor. There is a whole spectrum of kind of training that coaches go through and that are in this world now. But I absolutely concur with you that it's the feeling you have between the person that you're going to get support from, that has to be absolutely right for you. And even on this call, we have various niches of areas of life that we would have some expertise in. And I think for myself, in my own journey, I remember feeling it would be so difficult to find a counsellor, because my own journey had felt so unique and so different until I started speaking to more people, really. And that was challenging. But there are other elements that we can expect, I think, from the governing bodies, the authority of counsellor, that can support this conversation as well.
I think life experience is so important. Like I said, a lot of my clients come to see me because I'm childless, because I'm queer, because I'm neurodivergent. Some clients come and see me because they're all three and I'm all three. But I wouldn't work with those clients without my training. My training has been so important. And one of the things my training does, it enables me to provide a safe container for my clients, so that whatever they're bringing, I can hold it. I'm not troubled by it personally, even though we might have had some of the same experiences. There's a very firm, very clear boundary between me and my client, which is about that safe container in which they are the most important person. Their story is prioritized, and my story only comes in if my client asks me. And if my client asks me about how did I manage something, how did I cope with something, what's my story, and they know I'm childless already, I will 9 times out of 10 answer their question. If I don't answer it, it's either because it's private to me and I don't feel comfortable sharing it, and I've never had a client who hasn't respected that there are some things I don't share. Or if I check it out with the client and I say, look, I will tell you how I coped with X, but I wonder what it'd be like for you if I say, this is how I coped with it. What would it be like if I say, I did it this way? What would it be like if I say, I did it this way? What would it be like if I say I coped with it in a way and that's not something that you would do? So we really explore all those options. And then if they still want me to share, then I will share. So again, the safe container is so important. And coming back to regulation, so most counsellors will be members of a governing body, so to speak. The two most common in the UK, and I don't know so much about other countries, are the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy and the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society. I've been a member of both of them. And a good organising body like those will have a complaints procedure. So you've got somewhere to go if your counselling doesn't work and you've been harmed by your counselling. And they have a code of ethics, which the counsellors have signed up to. And there are requirements, like the counsellors have to keep their CPD, their continuing professional development, going. So these things are crucial. And these are things that I learned in my training. I learned how to be that boundaried, safe, containing person who can listen to anything and hold it. I can see there's some questions popping up in the chat. Would it be okay to answer them now, Alex, or would you
I think
rather
we're going to circle back to them, Mariel, if it's okay, because we've got more facets of this topic to bring to light, which might bring more.
I have seen your questions, everybody, and I will come back to them.
We have, and we will make sure we make time. So I really want to move this conversation on, because thank you for sharing that. It was really informative about the regulating body and the processes that people can expect a counsellor, a psychotherapist to have gone through and be associated with. Bindi, I wanted to ask you, so both you and myself, we run slightly different things. You run a meditation group, a social meetup group, for example. These are not, well, let's talk a bit about, I was going to say these are not things you need to be trained for, but actually that's one question I maybe have for you. And again, it's about showing as well this spectrum of support that's out there. So one might be that you'd like a one-to-one with a counsellor, but people might be looking for other different types of support as well. I wonder if you can talk me through some of the ways that you support people coming into your meditation groups or social meetups.
Yeah. So so let's start with the meditation. There is a lot of meditation out there. There are apps as well. There are different classes. There's a lot. And I think really increasingly, there's more and more and more. So the way I come to it with meditation is that you are going inwards, and that's always my starting point. When you go into that precious part of you, there are things that can come up. So having a teacher, a guide who can understand childlessness will definitely be a plus point, I've had classes before, so I've been teaching for a very long time, since 2003. And I've had my own classes, so yoga classes, not that I've taught, that I've gone to. And along the way, the teacher has become pregnant. And that has then triggered me. So that's like one of the things that I really, really recommend people, even people going to other classes and, other things, find out or ask yourself, first of all, what would be your triggers to those things. So yes, if it's a young enough teacher, the possibility of getting pregnant is definitely there. They might already be a mother, and they might mention motherly things during the classes. They might mention their children. So a lot of the choices that you might be making when you're looking at things, so different types of classes, not even meditation, it can be all different kinds of classes, so like yoga or art classes, all different kinds of things. Really ask yourself what you'll be okay with coming up in that situation, and also what that teacher is like with that. So are they, potentially looking for a partner, going to get married, going to have a family, things like that, and just kind of think about that definitely. And so the training, so I am actually trained in meditation, and I'm pretty sure there's not a blanket training for meditation. So you're really right about that. And I think anyone can possibly say, yes, they're a meditation teacher. There's no regulation around meditation. So it is, you're going to have to do your research as well about the person. One of the things that I would say when you do research is also find out, or just see what their practice is like, see what they are like, see if they practice meditation, because that's like a big thing. I mean, my own training was from the Ayurveda and yoga. So I went to India and I did Ayurveda and yoga. I did a diploma. Then I came back in 2003 when I was living in London and started teaching. I was teaching yoga as well, doing Ayurveda, doing meditation. And there will be teachers out there who are trained, who've been on courses, who are trained. And it's not necessarily that, it's, if they're not trained, they're not a good teacher. I would always say, what is their practice? That for me would be really, really important.
I think that's lovely advice, Bindi. Thank you. And before we move on as well, I just want to just acknowledge what you've shared as well. Absolutely. Less training or no training doesn't mean that invalidates the person that you're going to see. You just have to go in there with those open eyes and the research. And to Muriel's point, a training certificate doesn't automatically make a great person to support you either. So we do want to reiterate that point. But it's so interesting what you say about that safe container, which we've looked at, but also making sure those spaces you're going to feel comfortable in and you're not going to feel triggered in. And I had that question and journey myself. And actually, there were periods of my healing journey where I did need to be in very safe places, where I wasn't going to see a pregnant belly, where I wasn't going to see, a baby shower card come along, or all of those things which can be so achingly painful when you're at your rawest moment. But there have also been times during my healing journey when it's been incredibly helpful for me actually not to isolate myself too much in that way as well. For example, where I'm coming from the stepmom world, where we are a bit of forced to be one foot in each camp, some of the most powerful healing phrases that I've heard have actually come from some of the stepmoms who have said to me, who have had biological children, and have said to me, it doesn't eliminate all of the problems, that they have answered some sort of magical thinking or some position that I've put myself in as an other, as an outer. They've kind of given me a bit of a wake-up call around that, and I've been hugely grateful for that. And then I do want to acknowledge there have been times where I've needed to be just amongst childless stepmoms, and there are other times where I've needed to open that lens a bit more. And actually, I have received really helpful information from other people with other life experiences. So that is something that can open and close and change along your journey as you navigate your journey. Your journey isn't always going to be the same all the way through. So I do want to make a plug for that, if you like, and that share the benefits I've received from sometimes not keeping myself only in a childless space, and that I have found that helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I would just add to that as well, Alex, that it is where you are on this journey, but also none of us are in isolation from wider society, are we? So there are going to be triggers anyway in society. So I think, yes, having those perhaps safe spaces where you can grow into that. And then as you start moving along your journey a bit, where the childlessness, isn't the whole story of you as well, and you start finding a little bit of joy out there and moving on a bit, then yes, going into those other spaces where it possibly, doesn't really matter then to you as much as it did before. Yes, definitely.
I will say as well, I do recognize the part of myself, the younger part of myself on this journey, that also didn't know the benefit of being in childless community until I was really in it as well, and that I could actually switch off the noise from the outer world, if you like, and I could actually protect myself from pregnancy announcements and baby showers and so on. And that was a bit of a revelation. And I think sometimes as women, we can be trying to be like, no, I can get through this without needing this extra layer of support around things. And so I do remember that journey as well. I do remember a further journey which I had, which was really exploring embodiment and working through my grief and my pain through my body and through different practices as well. And I'm going to move on to Shaneen shortly to talk a little bit about trauma-informed and compassionate inquiry as well. And I want to share some of my journey around going to 5 Rhythms dance, which is a movement meditation practice, if you like, that you may or may not have heard of before, but it has the term 5 Rhythms dance, which is basically, it takes you through a process over an open class that is led by and hosted by a 5 Rhythms teacher, leads you through 5 different rhythms that mimic or mirror, I should say, your own internal world. So they are periods of stillness, periods of flow, periods of jaggedness. And I loved that practice for myself alongside other things that I was doing, as I felt that I took myself on that grief journey through that kind of 2-hour dance class, if you like, although dance class doesn't seem the right term for it if you've ever been to one of those classes. because I felt that I took myself through that journey, and I loved feeling that I love feeling and fostering that sense of resilience within myself and empowerment within myself. And so I loved following those embodied practices. And sitting alongside that is one of the other terms that we hear quite a lot, which is this is a trauma-informed space. And I'm just curious, Shaneen, in your working practice and in your own journey, what do you know about that term, and what can you share that's informative to people listening in today?
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, it's a very interesting question. There's a lot of buzz around this at the moment, isn't there? And I know for me, there was always that beckoning of, oh, there's something deeper, there's something deeper beyond the cognitive, beyond the thought. What are the other parts of the human experience? I am a trauma-informed occupational therapist, and I have been turning myself towards supporting childlessness over the last couple of years or so. I can't speak for all trauma-informed practices because it's not regulated. So it means different things to different people. And there's no blueprint for what you study or how long you study that then qualifies you to say that you are trauma-informed. Okay? So I can tell you what it means to me.
Mm-hmm.
I've completed my mentorship with Compassionate Inquiry, Gabor Mate's psychotherapeutic approach, and I'm also informed by polyvagal theory. So that's why I call myself trauma informed. And what happens in my work with people is that it's massively about creating safety. So we've already all spoken about containers. We all have different ways to create safety and to create that container, but it's specifically neurological safety in our nervous systems, in our polyvagal systems. So there's a lot about neurological safety, nervous system safety. It's about not only listening to the thoughts and words and cognition. Cognition isn't the king, isn't the sovereign. It's a part of a whole human system, which includes feeling states, neurological states, endocrinological states, emotions, thoughts. So it's a much bigger picture. So it's and it's this firm idea. It's this firm idea that it is about giving voice to all the parts of our experience. That nothing is to be left in the dark. Everything deserves to be heard and seen. And that, for me, is a particularly potent piece.
Yeah, thank you. And so important, I believe, to this experience of childlessness, which is so shrouded in stigma and shame. It's something we've internalized, just like Meryl described, over time from society, but also we feel it so heavy because we may have felt our bodies have let us down. We may have felt all sorts of reasons may have let us down, which we then internalize as our own faults and defects, and can come with that real shadow and that real shameful feeling, which is all about seeking support, which is really to shine the light on those dark corners that we're too afraid to speak about, to not just release the stigma and the shame, but to find validation, to find compassion for ourselves, to find that community around us that can connect us and help us to feel part of something and less alone with those kinds of feelings.
And one more point, please, Alex, that is quite important, is to say that, and I speak from my personal experience here as well, my childlessness experience lay on top of a deeper wounding. So that's where trauma-informed comes into it as well. It's not just suddenly that I'm experiencing childlessness and it makes me feel what it makes me feel. It's that it acted on something which already existed. And trauma-informed, in what I've been studying, is about the story that lays underneath it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, really important. So we're going to just talk a little bit further, and then we're going to come to questions just in about 5 minutes as well, to make sure we've got enough. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the spectrum there, where Bindi and I are in the social meetup section, and the support group kind of section as well. Again, this is about building community. This is about finding your tribe, finding your area where you feel a sense of belonging and you can feel resourced by meeting others. What role has that played for you, Bindi, in your own journey? How have those social meetups, what can people expect if they join those, and how has it helped? How can it help?
Yeah, well, social meetups, meeting in person. I do some through the meditation classes as well in person, and the Brighton ones. And I have to say, it just helps you to connect more. It helps you to see that you're not alone. So definitely within all of the Zoom things that I do as well, the group aspect of it, it shows that you're not alone. So that you see other faces, you see other people. And then when you do the in-person, you see that there are actual bodies to faces and that you're not alone in this journey. And I think that is so, so important. So the connection point with any kind of groups that you do, so the social groups or, the learning groups, so like the meditation or the other, like your step parenting groups, Alex, like all of those groups, so important. And also speaking, just because we've spoken a little bit about the identity part of it, what Shaneen and Mariel was also saying, and that intersection part is, I think, really, really important as well. So the step parent and being childless, for me, being a woman of colour and being childless, and those intersections are really, really important. And when you find other people with those as well, that just adds another layer to that connection. And what I've done very, very recently, so in the last year, actually, after last year's World Childless Week, is also set up a group for women of colour who are childless not by choice. So it's just adding that other layer or other piece of healing.
Absolutely. That's such a lovely point, Bindi. And yes, I've had women walk into our support groups, burst into tears and said, I've never actually been in a room with other childless stepmoms before. I've never actually met anybody else like that before. And that is incredibly healing to find that. And as we say, that's the shining of the light. That's the removal of the stigma when you come out and you see as a group work that there are others like you and that there are others on this path ahead of you, behind you. It's a really important step. Absolutely. Yeah, really important. So we've talked a little bit about one-to-one work. We've talked a little bit about group work. We've talked about trauma-informed. We've talked about counselling and the regulation and the support around that to better understand that. Let's have a look at some of the questions that we might have in the chat and see if we can get to answer some for people. Mariel, did you think you'd mentioned earlier you'd spotted something?
Yes. So hopefully everybody who put a question in the general chat has also popped their question in the specific Q&A place. And if you haven't found that, do let one of us know and we can help you and try and find it. But I have seen some questions about counselling, and I will just have a look at the ones in the Q&A chat.
Okay.
But if anyone thinks I've missed a question, please do shout out. So somebody's asked, can you talk about using personal therapy versus couples therapy? I'm doing both and curious how I can maximise each.
Great question.
Really good question. I work with couples as well as individuals, and a lot of my people, and actually I say couples, I should say relationships, because I work with people who are in thruples and polycules as well as two people couples. I work with all sorts of relationships. But a lot of my clients come and see me with their partner or partners, and they also have individual therapy, and this does seem to work well for people. One thing that I think is really important is when I'm working with the relationships, I keep everything in the room with the people in those relationships, so I don't see them individually outside of that, because the thing that I'm working with is not the individuals but the relationship. but those people are also individuals. And as Shaneen's pointed out, we often have underlying things that really inform where we are emotionally and therapeutically. So I think it can be really supportive to have individual therapy and relationship therapy. You might want some time to reflect on something that you've learned in the relationship session, and you might want to explore that more deeply. Or you might want to take something to the relationship counselling, but you want to really explore it individually first and make sure that you feel empowered to share it in a way that's going to make you feel strong and going to make you feel like you've said everything that you want to say. So as a counsellor working with both relationships and individuals, I really encourage people to have individual therapy alongside relationship therapy if you think it will work for you. I think the two things can really complement each other. I've mentioned a couple of ways that I think they can complement each other. And if anybody wants to talk about it more, I'm really happy for people to email me if anyone's got a further question specifically.
Thank you. I also coach individuals and couples, and I have found it really beneficial for them to have a bit of both, and often alongside the coaching journey as well, to have therapeutic support. A counselling as well works really, really well together. A coach versus a counsellor, really, a coach is more looking forward, would you say, Muriel, and is more about actions taking forward. In the step parenting world, irrespective, especially if they haven't brought their own biological children together to the family, it can be really helpful because so much of what you are addressing is that home life which you face together as a couple. Having said that, when that's not possible, when couples, partners aren't open to coming to therapy or coaching together, nonetheless, it is still can be beneficial for that individual to have, of course, that one-to-one support, because my experience, and I bet yours as well, Muriel, is that has a ripple effect. As one person starts to change, to heal, to grow, that can have a ripple effect on the family in different ways without them having all have attended the same therapeutic support as well. So I found that definitely over the years as well.
I really agree. And I think one thing that I've noticed, both from my own experience and from working with people in relationships, and I've heard Jodie write about this as well, and other people, is that we can be at different places in our counselling journey. So, for example, I might be in one place in my relationship to my childlessness, and if I was going to therapy with a partner or partners, they might be in different places. We can take it for granted sometimes that we're all in the same place, that we're all on the same part of the journey, but no, actually, as individuals in relationships, we often go through things in different ways. And I think it's really important to acknowledge in relationship therapy or coaching that sometimes we need to get to know where our partner or partners is, because it's not always going to be the same as us. And that can be a really supportive thing to do with a therapist. Sometimes when we're in relationships, and again, I've experienced this personally, we can want really different things. And not everybody wants to adopt. It doesn't work for everybody, but one partner might want to adopt and the other partner might not want to. And that can be really hard. That's one of the things that led to one of my relationships breaking up, was I really wanted to adopt and my partner didn't.
Absolutely. And I think I remember feeling at the time when myself and my partner, which obviously was in a complex situation, he already had children, but we weren't able to have a child of our own together. And that was really difficult. And navigating that grief, I remember I used to describe it as kind of two rocks inside a washing machine drum, going round. Occasionally our grief would be in sync and we'd be at the same point at the same time. But a lot of times we were just bashing off our pain against each other and being ping-ponged around that turning washing machine drum. And it was really, really difficult. And all kinds of grief journeys are really difficult. I can't imagine what it would be like to walk that path alone as well. That would have another layer of difficulty and complexity. Absolutely. But there is a complexity about, as a couple, as partners, navigating that grief and that loss together, because as you say, it's rare to be at the same point at the same time, open to that discussion with each other at the same time.
And one thing I'd really like to offer which I've never offered to clients, but I think it might really work, is when, and I think we've all been in this situation, we're childless, our best friend has children. And that can be such a difficult place to be. And I think that's an area where, because relationship counselling is not just people in romantic partners, it's all the relationships that we have in our lives. And I actually think that there might be some really fruitful work to be done in counselling with people with children who have a close friend who doesn't have a child, and vice versa, because that can be that's a really tough relationship. And I'm sure we've all experienced that.
Thank you, Meryl. We're going to keep going with the questions. There's one question in the Q&A box around therapist counsellors that specialise in childlessness. And I know that someone has shared the link to the list of therapists in the other webinar chat. So I'm going to take that as answered at this point, because we're limited on time. There's been a second question about understanding different qualifications in different areas of the world. I'm not sure that we are qualified to discuss that at the moment. We're speaking from the UK, and the person who's put that question in, thank you for asking. However, I don't think on this occasion that's going to be our specialism, that we're going to be able to answer that for you. Although I think I just popped in, I see Muriel's going in there to put some words in there for you as well. Thank you as well for everyone sharing into the webinar chat their stories. That's really, really kind of you, and my heart going out to absolutely childless stepmoms as well that are talking into that chat for us as well. There's an interesting question come along here at the end. Please, can you recommend groups that include people on the cusp of childlessness who are struggling, even though they haven't reached that hard line of infertility or yet gone through menopause? I'm in my mid-40s and unfortunately told that I don't qualify for groups because there may still be a small chance for me. I find this so difficult because it's part of the community. It's so important, and I only want to feel included and accepted. First of all, thank you, the anonymous person who put in that question. That's we're really grateful, and thank you. And I'm sorry to hear about what's happening for you at the moment. Bindi, I wonder if yourself and I could support the answering of this question. So, that hard line when women are still perhaps that they're feeling that the window is closing, that the hope is reducing, that it's looking harder and harder, but they haven't reached, as described by this person, the hard line that this definitely won't happen. What are your thoughts for somebody in that situation looking for support?
Yeah, that kind of middle ground. I'll start answering it from the other kind of point of view from the group, and then try and answer it that way. So first of all, within the Childless Not by Choice community, and within all the different groups that we hold and other practitioners hold, it's really important that people coming into those groups who are childless not by choice and at that stage are comfortable within that. So if there is a chance, a very small chance or a slight chance that someone could get pregnant, especially if they're groups where there's connection and people start making friends and getting to know each other, and then one of them goes on, a journey, that can then add to the trauma of what that person or the people, if it's a group setting, what then they experience. So that, just coming to it from that, just as a kind of a reasoning of why those groups do that, and why we have guidelines in groups, because that's very, very important. That you're comfortable. And when you come into a childless not by choice space, you want to be comfortable knowing that everyone is childless not by choice. And of course, on the other hand, it's so difficult when you're not quite there, and but you still need that support, and you still need a group, or you still need that support. And I would say perhaps that support then is more of a one-to-one. I don't know what anyone else thinks, but I'm thinking more of a one-to-one, because I can imagine, even with the one-to-one work I do, I could do that with someone who's not completely sure, but the group setting would be more difficult. I don't know, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Bindi. Shaneen, your hand shot up. I've got something to share on this as well.
Yes, I do. What a brave question. I can't imagine what it must be like in that situation. I'm really, really feeling you right now. And while I don't have a short, concise answer for you, what I can share is that within my group of women friends here in Brighton, there are many women going through what you're going through. You're not alone. I don't know if there are any groups set up, but I know you're not alone. And my wish for you, that you will have the conversations and find other women going through something similar as well.
Thank you, Shaneen. I would like to share for you from the stepmom community that I hold. This is common, so I don't hold the boundary quite as strongly as Bindi has described in my particular scenario, because for several reasons, actually. For those women who are still in the trying to conceive, even if it feels like very near the end of that trying to conceive journey, it's a really tough time. And I think it's really important to be inspired by people ahead of you as well. And that can be something that community can offer you. I also, and I remember this when I went to the Reignite weekend that is run by Gateway Women, they said that often people would come along to that Reignite weekend and they would almost try for about another year. They were starting to dip their feet into thinking, childlessness might be one of my future identities. And they're almost starting to sort of dip their feet into that. And of course, inevitably, some things happen in those 12 months. And in the childless stepmom community that I run, definitely there have been some women for whom their childless status has changed over time. Either they've come to terms with it themselves, or the extraordinariness of life and conception has meant that different things have changed and their childlessness status may not have always remained the same. And that's a difficulty for the group to go through. That's a difficulty for the person who's running the groups to manage. And I think it really circles back to Meryl and Bindi's and Shaneen's points around this, about picking the person that you're being supported with really carefully, so that you know that person, you have trust in that support group leader, that counsellor, that whoever they are, that trauma-informed specialist, that they can handle all of the elements of group work and one-to-one work as well. And they can navigate this with the group, because these things, as we've mentioned, we're not in isolation. These things can happen. I've seen it happen to my own childless stepmoms. I'm sure it's happened in other groups. And the way it was mentioned about the Reignite weekends, I have a feeling maybe it happens there as well. So it is really important. Again, it's that really important aspect of really picking the person that you're going to get support from and taking your time and choosing them. There's been another question come in, which is probably the last question we'll have time for today in this webinar today. The time has rushed through this conversation. And this person has come in to ask, I understand the psychological safety of the container. I wonder if the community should be more inclusive. Childless not by choice should be based on the childless identity rather than fertility status. Thank you. That's I guess that's led into sort of the previous questions and the previous themes that have come through. I don't know, Meryl, what are your thoughts on this and psychological safety, which is something important we should mention before we close?
Yeah, because I think we've touched on why it's really important for groups to be psychologically safe spaces, because we come into these groups as very vulnerable people who've not necessarily found our peer group, who've not been understood, who may have had very negative comments addressed to us by all sorts of people, both with and without children. I think in the UK, which is all I can really speak about, my understanding of the childless community in the UK is that it is inclusive of more than just fertility status, that it is inclusive of people who just didn't meet somebody while their fertile years were still happening. And therefore, their fertility status is unknown, for example, because they just didn't meet somebody at the right time. There are lots of LGBTQ plus people who lived at a time when it was pretty much impossible to have a child, both through adoption or through the natural way, whatever that is. So I think in the UK, a lot of the groups that I know of draw on Jodie's description of there being 50 ways to not be, Jodie says a mother, I would say a parent. And there are obviously more than 50, but in her book, she lists 50 ways to not be a mother stroke parent. So I think we do have a sense in the UK of infertility being social, being medical, being to do with our sexuality or our gender identity. So I guess I hope that the groups would be inclusive, and counselling and coaching and meditation groups and all sorts of things would be inclusive of those identities. I think when it gets a bit more complex, and I've seen this happen in the Aging Without Children community, is when somebody has children but is not in contact with those children for various reasons. And this is mostly we're talking about adult children. They're not in contact with their adult children. They're not supported by their adult children. And I think that's a bit of a grey area that has come up a bit in the AWOC, Aging Without Children community in the UK, is, are they childless or not? And there's no one answer, frustratingly. It's not a black and white yes and no situation. So I think that's where we have to be really careful. But generally, I think we are aware, certainly again in the UK, other people might have different experiences of how there are many, many ways to be childless, many ways not to have children.
I think also it comes up, for me, it's come up before in the secondary infertility world as well, where they've had one child. And for example, in the blended family situation, they may have had one child with a previous partner, now met somebody at a later date, but are unable to have what we describe in the stepmom community as an hours baby with their new partner, or they had an hours baby, but the second one that they longed for didn't come along. And there is that question and that blurring of, is that the same lived experience? Which community can that one go into? And that can, again, be a trigger and can be difficult for women who didn't have their first child to empathize and embrace the secondary infertility experience as well.
I certainly have had people, I mean, I actually had a counsellor, so I went to see a counsellor many years ago, and the issue of my childlessness came up. She said, I understand how you feel because I had to have IVF to have my children. And I was a bit like, I hear what you're saying. Thank you. I'm not sure you do understand how I personally feel, but I can see how your experience might have been useful to other people. But I felt quite othered by that comment because, again, you know, that was a different experience to mine. But we have many of these different experiences, and I think finding ways to incorporate people with loads of different experiences is really important. I think we can all find our tribe.
Yeah, I agree.
We've
really experienced it in the stepmom community as well. We often are considered to be parenting or living in family or parenting world, and therefore perhaps not experiencing childlessness in the same way. I think if that would be completely different, if you spoke to any childless stepmom, they would quickly inform you that that is not the case. But again, we have had that duality with one foot in each camp, and sometimes that difficulty of finding our space, which is personalized in between those two camps, that experience. So we're due to wrap up now. We're coming to the end of our time. Thank you so much, everybody who has joined us today on the call. It's been a really informative and rich discussion. We've been able to talk about some of the different bits of advice and information that we wanted to share with yourselves that are listening in today. And also we talked about some of the ways that you can look for the support that you might need in different areas and different forms of practices, but really doing your research, checking how comfortable you're going to be in that group. Does that group or that one-to-one space serve you? Is it the right place for you? And even if on paper it looks like it should be, encouraging you to delve even deeper into that and to trust your instincts and know when you feel like you found the home for where you are at this point in your journey at this time, and the needs you might have at that time, which might be more one-to-one focused and very protected, or it may be more into a group setting or a socializing setting. You may have different needs at different times as you navigate your journey. But underpinning all of those experiences, really that research, that trusting of your gut instinct, that looking for good guidelines around confidentiality, support, how those groups are run and where they're run from, so that you can be better supported by them and have a really positive experience from them. And I suppose it's our last wish as we wrap up today from the panel here talking today, that you go forward from here with some information. If you viewed this on YouTube or joined us live today, we wish you very well on your journey. We have all alongside you with all of your different steps that you may be taking. We hope that this has been really informative to you. We've shown you a broad and diverse experience on this panel today and talked about some of the challenges, even for the childless community, as it evolves and needs to become even more inclusive and accepting of different experiences. And where do we place those limits? These are all great questions that we can ask ourselves, and we can grow and adapt and change our thoughts and feelings around them as we grow as well. So they are not fixed necessarily. And I think we just wish you well, everybody listening in today. We really hold you in our hearts and hope that you're able to find the different modalities that support you at this time, and wish you well on your journey. And if we come along and meet you, we'll be very happy and welcome you with open arms. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on the call today, and for my panel of experts today for this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex, for bringing us together.